friends, it's Ranger Russ at the Meggs Point Nature Center with another program of my favorite animal. Now, we have been doing 2 programs a week, or 2 programs a day, 4 days a week, Tuesday to Friday at 11 and 2. I think this is probably going to be the last week of that. Next week, I am going to be going on vacation. So we're going to change it up a little bit for next week. Not sure how we'll do it, but look for those changes next week. And then after that, I think we're going to go to 1 day a week. And we'll see how, or 1 program a day. We'll see how that goes. Now, this is another one of my favorite animals. And I'm going to ask you to guess what the animals are as I go, what the animal is. I've got some clues that I'm going to show you here in a second. But there are some things that you should keep in mind. So, the Meggs Point Nature Center is a Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection facility. And we try and focus on animals that are found, or habitats, environments, things that are related to or found in Connecticut. So that being said, I'm going to start with the first clue, which is the track. Okay, I'll put my hand, this is pretty close to actual size. So I'll put my hand there for comparison. Do we have any guesses what that would be? All right. That's your first clue for today's favorite animal. I appreciate everyone putting up where you're messaging from. That's really cool. We've got Cromwell and Marlborough already. And we have a guess of a deer. And this, you're close, but not a deer. Next, I'm going to show you the pelt. So this is the pelt of our animal. This is only a partial pelt. This is not a full pelt. The Nature Center couldn't afford a full pelt. I would really like to get one, but they're like $2,000, so we didn't get a full pelt. But take a look at that. Long, thick fur. It's coarse. It's not soft. It looks like might be soft, but this is not. This is very coarse, thick. Look at how thick that fur is. When I stick my fingers in there, the fur is as long as my finger. So nice, thick, long. Caribou, reindeer, no. You're close. Everybody's on the right track so far. Let's take a look at another one. There's Nyanik coming in. This is the skull. Okay. Take a look at that. So we've talked a little bit about herbivore versus carnivore when it comes to skulls. And you can see very flat teeth along there, not sharp and jagged. There we go. People have it now. It is a moose. Okay. Flat teeth in the back. Okay. Nice grinding teeth. So that tells us it's a herbivore. All right. Another clue, which we didn't need, is this is our largest animal. It's not only the largest mammal, but it's the largest resident animal. Remember, I did a sea turtle program a while back. Those animals get bigger, the largest sea turtles, but they're only visiting Connecticut. So this is the largest resident animal in Connecticut. You can see that past sea turtle program if you go to meggspointnaturecenter.org. We've got a virtual learning center. And you can also visit Meggs Point Nature Center's YouTube channel. So there's the silhouette of the moose. Okay. They are large. They can get 10.5 feet long, 7 feet tall. So very large, 1,300 pounds. Okay, that is large. That is a big animal. They have very long legs. Imagine 1,300 pounds moving through the forest. Now I actually have here an antler. Let me pick it up because these guys can weigh over 30 pounds. So together, they get up to about 75 pounds. So imagine this one's probably 30 pounds. They can get a bit heavier, 30 37 or so pounds for one antler. Okay, this is just one of the antlers. When these are on the animal, so it would be situated kind of like that, move back, okay? This would be the front and tip down. The bull moose would use this to charge and battle one another, okay? So imagine that coming at you. If you're another moose, you're going to lower your antlers and try and defend yourself. But if that stabbed you, you would not be in good shape, okay? This is a big animal, and they can do damage to people. Now, generally, they ignore us if you're ignoring them, so we would be pretty good. Let me put this one down, because I actually have the other side of that is right here. All right. How cool is that? Now, imagine this. You're a bull moose. They grow these antlers every year, okay? So these antlers drop off sometime around the first of the year, and by March or April, they're growing back. It takes them about 3 months to grow these in. When they grow in, they're covered with velvet, and then they scrape that velvet off on twigs and branches and things like that. But imagine, so they use these, the moose only use these to fight for territory, to fight for females. So the males have these, they battle it out. The skull that we looked at, and I'll show it again, is a cow. It's not a bull moose. So a female is a cow, a male is a bull, and the babies are calves. So just like cows. But this is a cow moose, so it doesn't have antlers. Only the males have antlers. And they're going to fight back and forth. They're going to duel with these. But then the antlers fall off. Imagine if one antler falls off, so there goes 35 pounds, and the other antler is still on. You've got 35 pounds sticking out the side of your head, trying to tip your head over. Think of the neck muscles that it would take to keep your head straight. Think of the neck muscles it takes to hold 75 pounds of antler, if both of them were on, up. So that's why they have a really thick neck. If you look at the silhouette, look at how thick that neck is. And this is a bull moose, so they have really big, thick muscles in their neck to hold up all this weight. But all this weight, it's only there for a few months during breeding season. So they're going to, breeding season for them is September to October. I'm going to set this on the table here. This is really big. And what I'm going to do in a second, I'm going to show you these laid out on the table so you can see how big they are together. But let's take a look back at the skull. So again, the cow, there's no place for antlers to grow. And the difference between an antler and a horn, antlers grow and fall off every year. They shed every year. Horns continue to grow. Horns are hairs grown together, modified hairs grown together to create the horn, and they continue to grow the animal's whole life. They don't drop off. Antlers grow and fall off every year, and they have a bony base. All right, there's some questions I should answer here. Do you think that velvet scraping is painful? So I've heard when they scrape the velvet that it's not painful, but it's itchy, and they really want to get the velvet off of them. And that's why a bull moose will lower their antlers into bushes and just thrash back and forth when that velvet is there, and they're really trying to scrape off all that velvet. All right, let's see if we have any questions. What do you call a moose wearing a mask? A nana-moose. That's pretty good. All right. So I'm not seeing any other questions. Let's look back at the track, because this is kind of a giveaway. If you're familiar with animals in Connecticut, it has a split hoof. Okay? This looks a lot like a deer track. The difference is that a deer track is only going to be about that big. Okay? Remember, deer, these guys are well over 1,000 pounds. A deer are just a few hundred pounds. So there's a big difference when it comes to the size of that hoof. And you got a little bit of an indent in the back here. That's the, I think it's called the dew claw on them as well as other animals. Okay. Are their antlers made of calcium or keratin or something else? What diet provides the moose with the nutrients needed to make up those huge antlers? Great questions. So the antlers are made up of bone. That's it's just basically looks like a bone after the velvet is scraped off. They eat bark, roots, and twigs. They believe that the name moose actually comes from the Algonquin word for twig eater. So that's how we think that the name originated. Not sure about that, but that's what they believe because they eat a lot of twigs. Their main habitat are wetlands. They can be in forests. They like forests, but marshy, wet areas, bogs, places like that. That's the kind of habitat that you're going to see them. And they're eating a lot of roots. They'll actually eat tubers and twigs and all sorts of things that they can get in those marshy, wet areas. That's the best place to find moose. And, okay, let's move this around here. Let's go back to the silhouette a second, because I want you to look. A lot of people can't figure out the pointy end of the antlers. They're sort of pointing up, but if the head were down, they would be really pointing forward. And again, those antlers are for battling other moose. Now imagine all the energy it takes to grow those antlers and battle, and then they drop off and you start regrowing them again. So it's really interesting that that's the way they do. Now, usually a moose is only going to have one offspring, and again, the breeding season is September to October. And we do have moose in Connecticut. Now, the last count that I saw estimated we had about 150 moose in Connecticut. That was actually an older survey. I haven't seen a more recent one. I'd really like to see how many we have in Connecticut now. And most of the sightings are all in the northern part of Connecticut, right along the northern border of Connecticut. I see another question. We have, if antlers do not have nerves, how do they feel the itching? So I'm not going to say that they don't have nerves. I think that the velvet does have nerves. There are veins, blood flowing through the velvet to help the antler grow. So I think that they probably do have nerves in the velvet to make them itchy. Kind of amazing that they grow each year. Yeah. So, you're growing 75 pounds of growth each year just to drop it off again. So that is a pretty crazy thing when you think about it that way. All right, do we have any other questions? I'm going to move the camera so that you can see the antlers spread out here. I don't even think I have enough room. Okay, take a look at that. I'm going to try and move them down so they're both in the picture together. So it can be 7.5 feet from the tip of this antler to the tip of this antler. All right, if you imagine, just pretend that this is a bull moose skull. It would be in the middle here somewhere. And the antler would sit roughly like that. Now, you can obviously see by looking at the size where this was cut off of the skull and the size of this skull, that a male's skull, a bull moose skull, is going to be substantially larger. This was not a large female moose, but a bull moose is going to be a whole lot larger than the cow moose. And we were talking about veins and nerve endings in the velvet. If you look here, you can see these would be the major veins that get the blood out so that these antlers can grow. Okay? I don't know if you can you see those grooves there? Let's move it closer. So these lines here, that would be how the blood gets out. And the bone needs all that blood nutrients to grow larger and larger. Again, the set is 75 pounds. This set is not 75. The largest ones are 75 pounds. This set, I think I weighed it. It was right around 60 pounds for the set together. I actually think it was just under 60. All right, any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. Is there anything else I want to tell you guys about moose? Their territory, that's an interesting fact. Their territory is about 6 miles. So it's not a very large territory. And like most animals, the male's territory is going to be slightly larger than the female's territory. So that's something to keep in mind. And they're not endangered in Connecticut or threatened in any way. They're really just starting to migrate into the state. So I want to say they've been in Connecticut, I don't know, 20 years or so. They've been working their way down. At first it was just a sighting here or there, so not considered residents. I believe that Rhode Island had a calf sighting before we did here in Connecticut. And that was back in the 90s, actually. So they were a little bit before us as far as having a baby moose. But now we've got breeding population of moose. They're having their babies here. They may start to expand, a little bit further south, but they really like those marshy, wet areas in the north. It's a better habitat for them. Down here along the shoreline where Hammonasset is, probably not the greatest habitat. I don't know of any moose that really like to hang out in salt marshes. So they like freshwater swamps and marshes. And they are related to the deer. This is the largest member of the deer family. So if you think of it that way, they're cousins to the deer. And somebody mentioned caribou earlier. These are also their cousins to the elk and the caribou and the moose. If you saw our moraine trail program, I did time travel geology on our moraine. I talked about elk that used to live in Connecticut, big giant I don't want to say prehistoric elk, but really 12,000, 15,000 years ago, those elk were probably about the size of a moose, but they were in the elk family, or had elk-shaped horns, not like the moose antlers. Sorry, they had antlers as well, but their antlers were more like deer antlers, thinner, where these have these big, broad, wide plates. And that's something interesting too. I don't know what the significance of these are, but if you look at a moose antler, a deer antler is going to have these thin parts, but a moose antler has this big, wide, flat plate. And I'm not sure what the use of it is, or whether it has any use at all. It just happens to be the way that they evolved. It just makes them look much larger when they lower their head. It looks like a bulldozer coming at you instead of just a whole bunch of horns. Okay, am I seeing any questions? Not seeing any questions, so we can just wrap it up. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to remind you that next week I will be on vacation. I'll be back on Friday, so I'll be doing more programs on Friday. And I might do a couple of programs from my vacation. We'll see what I can find. So if I don't see any other questions, all right. I want to thank you all for watching another episode of My Favorite Animal from the Meggs Point Nature Center. I want to remind you that if you go to the Virtual Learning Center, we have lots of additional information that will be added once this video is put up there. You can also visit Connecticut's other educational facilities sites, so Kellogg Environmental Center, Dinosaur State Park, Goodwin Conservation Center. You can find out about the great backyard pursuit and No Child Left Inside. We have connections to all those great things on our website under the Virtual Learning Center. So this afternoon at 2 o'clock, I'll be back for another program. I hope that you can all make it then. Until then, this is Ranger Russ signing off.